A lovely day here in New Orleans, Louisiana. And by lovely, I do mean rainy. I do mean wet. And for whatever reason down here, it's just like when things get wet, things don't work. And we've had some issues here this morning with getting stuff on, and I have no earthly idea why I'm even getting a signal here now. But yeah, so we're going to go with this, and hopefully in the next 2 days I'll come up with a better, more reliable way to do this than just the YouTube channel stuff, because I don't get it. It's just kind of a crazy deal between the power and the internet. I don't know. I had the folks out here from Cox Cable out here at the house yesterday working on this very thing yesterday afternoon, and then this morning I started turning everything on. It's just like, what the heck? Where's my internet signal? So anyway, guys, there we go. I apologize about the delay. Hopefully it's not messing you up here too bad. So what we're going to do, as advertised, we're going to get into chapter 21. There was a question about airspace and VFR weather minimums. Remember on this and on the airspace questions, if you, let me think about this for just a minute. In Big Blue, airspace, I think, is chapter 9. VFR weather minimums in Big Blue, I believe, is chapter 4. And in Big Red, you're not going to find VFR weather minimums in Big Red because that's the instrument book. But you are going to find airspace questions, and I want to say that's in chapter... Oh boy, I think it's in Departures. I believe it's in the chapter with Departures. Is that 5, maybe? With that, I don't have that book sitting right here in front of me, but I believe it's somewhere there. And so what we're going to do is that on the quiz coming up, we'll include airspace questions with Departures because it kind of fits with that also. So find those sections, and you can just look through the table of contents, and you can see, you know, I believe, I'm pretty sure it's chapter 4, VFR weather minimums, and in Big Blue, pretty sure it's chapter 9 in Big Blue on the airspace questions that we have. And then in Big Red, look for those, and you'll see, I want to say it's 5. I could be wrong. And so look for those. We'll include those here on the Departures stuff that we're going to be doing for our next quiz. I wanted to do the Departures quiz on Wednesday, but I don't think we're going to be through that. So what we'll probably do is we'll wrap up Departures on the Wednesday class, and then we will start into the en route portions there on Wednesday. But look for a quiz on Friday with Departures, airspace, VFR weather minimums. Now, for those of you that, let me pull this up here, stand by. Those of you, let me grab this here. Whoops, am I on the right thing? Yeah, there we are. Okay, so if you guys remember this little weather pyramid thing and knowing how to draw this, this is a thing that you're going to want to again commit to memory, because this is how you're going to remember your VFR weather minimums. And when you look at this, this is what you're going to fill it in, and this is how it's going to look. So I'm going to leave this up here, and for those of you that need to double check your drawings, I will ask Mrs. Benton to kind of pause the video here and allow you guys to look at this and draw this to make sure that you understand where all of this VFR weather minima comes from. Again, questions, things like this, you know, it's a wonderful modern age in which we live. The whole thing here about, you know, these cellular devices is that I can get text messages and emails darn near anywhere, except in the mornings here at my house, it appears. So there's, you know, there's that. So questions, if you have questions, let me know what they are. So there's that. So make sure you copy that off. You can pause this for a second and you put this on just so that you remember. For instance, above 10,000 feet here, MSL, What we have here is that we have 5 statute miles visibility, statute mile visibility, not nautical mile, 5 statute mile visibility. You have to stay you cannot get any closer than 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 1 nautical mile horizontal. Below 10,000 feet in Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo airspace, your visibility minimums are going to be 3 statute miles and no closer to a cloud than 500 feet below, 2,000 feet horizontal, and 1,000 feet above. In Class Golf airspace, the least restrictive airspace, this is in daytime here with Golf, is that you can take this down to 1 statute mile visibility. And anytime that you're operating 1,200 feet and lower AGL, if you're in Class Golf airspace, not in Class Echo airspace, but if you're in Class Golf airspace, it's 1 statute mile visibility and just clear of clouds. And the same thing applies to Class Bravo airspace. You have to have 3 statute miles visibility and maintain clear of clouds, or what we call COC. At night in Class Golf reverts back to the Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo airspace below 10,000 feet MSL. And this is a great way for you guys to remember what the airspace, what the VFR weather minimums are. So there you go. Copy that down. Off you go. Now, another thing that I want to throw out at you here, and I'm not 100% sure what's going on. Oh, there we go. Okay, never mind. I figured it out. Another thing that I want you guys to remember is that I talked to you guys long time ago about the Aeronautical Chart User's Guide. Everyone was supposed to download that, correct? So what I want you to do is I need you to make sure that you have that on something that you can, whether you print it off. I think there's 129 pages. Yes, that's what it shows right down here. To print this off, because what it does is that it shows not just the VFR stuff for sectionals, but it also has IFR information in it as well. And if you look at some of the information contained in this, you can see that there is indeed some very useful information, including some airspace information here also, okay? So make sure that you have access to this at all times. So whether it's some form of electronic thing that you have, whether it is something that you have on paper, but this is one of those guides that you need to know how to use and to navigate, okay? So there's that. Now, on to departures. So when we look at instrument departures, remember this is a way to get away from an airport as you begin your IFR flight plan. So the things that you're going to do is again, a lot of the information that are contained in the margins here of your reading, and I know that you all did the reading. So with this, you can see here that in these margins, use all relevant information when making a sound go, no-go decision. Well, duh. That's part of the deal, is that you ultimately have to pull in all this information to make sure that you can go. Remember, the big difference between VFR and IFR flight is VFR, it's going to be pretty simple. If you can't stay away from those clouds, you can't go. But in the IFR world, now, if you're so rated, then you can penetrate those clouds. But the question now becomes, should you? And that's the big question. So, whether at the departure airport, this is kind of an interesting thing, is because there are going to be visibility minima that we have here for the big boys. So for instance, the airlines, they're going to have certain visibility minimums that they have to abide by. And what's interesting is that under Part 91, which is the way that most of us begin flying here with this, is that you don't have the weather minima that you may have otherwise. The big thing here is that we're definitely going to check the ATIS, because the ATIS is going to tell us where we are here visibility wise. That is kind of the official broadcast thing here. And by official, I mean this. Let's say, God forbid, somebody goes up there and does something silly in an airplane. One of the things that they do in the investigation is that they come back and they take a look at all of the official information. So if you, on one hand, are reporting later that, oh my gosh, well, the visibility was reported at being, 5 statute miles visibility, and then they look at the official word from the airport at that time that you launched and shows that the visibility was inside a mile statute miles of visibility, guess which one they're going to use? They're going to use that official thing. So you have to understand why that is there. It's there for your safety. So it's one of those things that you just you can't skirt this. Okay, so understand that is an official broadcast. So keep that in mind. So when you're looking here, most like in Aspen, most of the things are going to be the ATIS. You're going to have AWOS or ASOS. That's going to be the automated weather observing systems that you have. And remember, this is a regulatory question. During the day, when will an airport flash their rotating beacon here? And basically, it's any time that the weather is less than the VFR weather minima. That's usually when the thing will start rotating and during the day. So takeoff minimums. So to take off, would it surprise you to know that in Part 91, which is where we operate, and guys, again, you got to bone up on those regulations. This is why this class is as challenging as it is because you have a lot of material that you're responsible for all the time. And in looking at those regulations, we're operating here on Part 91, and would it surprise you to know that you could conceivably take off on a runway with 0-0 conditions with regard to visibility? I mean, technically you could do that. However, here's a good rule. If when you're looking at these things here, and you're looking at this right here on this side, it says if conditions are too poor for highly trained professional pilots in commercial aircraft, then they might be too poor for you as well. So, the way I remember it, if Boeing ain't going, I ain't going. Capiche? Okay? Now, you're going to be responsible for knowing what the standard takeoff minima are. All right? So you have to know all of this stuff here. Okay? And there are different engine things that you have to understand. I'm sure you've read this and I'm sure you've taken notes, and I know that right now, being more than 3/4 of the way through this course, you have figured out that anything with a bullet point is probably something you're going to see on a quiz. Yep. So when you look at this here again, now we're introduced to something here that is a little bit different. And this is what we call a climb gradient. You remember that we talk about on our VSI, we talk about climbing or descending at a certain rate, okay? So many feet per minute, okay? That's on the VSI. However, in this, we're introduced to something a little bit different called a climb gradient. It is feet per nautical mile. What's the difference, you ask? Well, it can be a pretty big difference. Understand that feet per nautical mile is not the same as feet per minute. So, in your terminal area charts, you know that packet of stuff that you have with those loose leaf approach plates with all of that stuff on there? Do you remember those? Either on the front cover or the back cover. I want to say it's the front cover. I could be wrong. On the front cover or the back cover, on the inside portion of this, you will see a climb gradient table. And in that climb gradient table, what it will do is that it will show you the approximate what the feet per nautical mile is compared to feet per minute at a given airspeed. Because again, remember that your climb gradient is going to be dependent on what your airspeed is. Your feet per minute are going to be associated with the speed at which that you're covering the ground, covering the distance, because this is just trigonometry here on this. So I want you to locate in that, and again, remember, from this point on, you bring everything with you to class. You bring it all, because we're going to start using it all. And in those sheets, you're going to find that climb gradient. And again, if you just look at the X and Y axes of this and you match up the speed, in most cases, we'll be looking at like 90 knots for the test questions on these things, 90 knots. But you need to take a look at it as what the difference is going to be if you're going a little slower, if you're going a little faster, like let's say 120 knots, and to see what that equivalent of the feet per minute is going to be to your feet per nautical mile. The climb gradient versus the rate. Okay, so look that up and you'll see what I'm talking about there. So when you're looking at this, is that in those standard takeoff minimums, is that you've got to have here 200 feet per nautical mile or better. In some cases, in some mountain airports, that climb gradient, your takeoff minima, may actually be higher than 200 feet per nautical mile. You want to be able to then have a higher climb gradient of greater than 200 feet per nautical mile in the mountains. So make sure that you look at that and see what that is on that card. If you look here, for instance, at what we're talking about, you can see, here's some examples here. If you have a ground speed of 90 knots, you can see that 200 feet per nautical mile is going to be a climb gradient, a rate of approximately 300 feet per minute. So you need to kind of see what that looks like here. And if you see the higher ground speed here, 200 feet per nautical mile, then you'd have a rate here of 400 feet per minute. All right? So that's what you're looking for here. The reason that you have these climb gradients that are established here on your takeoff minima are going to be obstacle avoidance. So if you look out here on this image, and again, somewhere out here past the end of the runway are going to be these mythical FAA 50-foot trees that are going to be out there, and they want to make sure that you can out-climb the obstacles that are out there in your way. So that's the reason for the climb gradient. Obstacle clearance procedures. You're going to look at this, and again, if there's a bullet point on it, kiddos, that's going to be up there for you. You gotta know what it is. Sometimes there are going to be certain runways that may not have an IFR takeoff because of obstacle clearance issues, or they will have a very high climb gradient that you must be able to meet in order for you to actually take off from that airport IFR. Because, you know, this all boils down to the age-old adage of DHN, Delta Hotel November, don't hit nothing. So you look at these bullet points. All of these bullet points here are test questions. RVR, runway visual range. Guys, from this point on, it's going to be acronym soup. So remember where to look up your acronyms on this. By the way, do you remember this? Yep. I'll bet you that at the end of this that there's a lot of definitions and acronyms at the end of that. I'm just guessing. So you got to look here and understand what RVR is, runway visual range, and understand how it's measured and understand how it's used. Okay? You can read that. It is pretty self-explanatory. Takeoff minimums. For you to look at this, there's a couple of different ways that these things can go. One is that you can have them spelled out here with certain departure procedures and to say these are going to be what the takeoff minimums are. Anytime that you see that T over here on something here, it's telling you that there is a special minimum here for this particular airport, okay, or that particular procedure. any kind of like a non-standard takeoff minimum, that's where you're going to see this T for takeoff. All right. So as you look here, you can also see here on the Jeppesen side of things here is that you can also see that you'd have some departure procedures that are going to be spelled out for you here also, okay? And your takeoff minima. So you'll have visibility requirements and you'll have some climb gradient requirements. So understand where to find those and understand what they are. And we look here again, not just hitting something, but moving targets as well. We've gone through this turbulence, avoid wake turbulence on your takeoff. And I will tell you this right now, there's nothing that'll get your attention quicker than some unusual attitude that you may find yourself in on departure. Because if you're in the clouds and you're coming up, it is a high workload environment on your departure, just like it's a high workload environment on your arrival and approach. Yeah. Try to avoid those things that are going to upset your aircraft, because that could be the beginning of a bad day. See right there, it says avoid wake turbulence. It says so right there. Okay, setting your course. So before you launch, do you think it's going to be a pretty good idea for you to know kind of what it is that you're going to be flying to get out there and starting your takeoff? You don't want to be just out there just kind of flogging the clouds willy-nilly, you know, on your departure. And so you've got to understand what it is that you're setting your navigation instruments for. And the reason that you want to do that is because it's the kind of thing that you really don't want to be messing with on the fly, as it were. So understand that you're going to be presetting a lot of things on your instruments before you take off. Normally on the VFR, what you're going to do is on a VFR departure, you're going to line up on the runway, you're going to double check the numbers to your wet compass and your HSI, make sure you're on the right runway, so you're going to triple check numbers, 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 and you're checking those three things. And in most cases, you're going to be setting your heading bug, that little thing on your heading indicator, to fly your runway heading. Well, in some cases, when you know that you're going to have an immediate turnout on some kind of a turn for a departure procedure, or to go intercept a radial off a VOR to go fly out to fly your procedure, your departure procedure, in some cases you may want to, instead of setting that heading bug on your runway, you may want to set that heading bug on this turn that you're going to have to make to go intercept the first portion of the leg of your departure. So those are going to be some things to visit with your instructor about kind of how you want to set those things up. Because again, what's the most important thing in aviation? That is correct. The next thing. So you've got to stay ahead of what you're doing, especially when you're flying in the clouds. Okay? So those are going to be a couple of things that you're going to want to do. Another thing that you're probably going to want to do as well is that as you're thinking about, you know, the whole, you know, what's next piece and the whole setting the course types of things, you got to think in terms of where's my wind, you know, where's the terrain, where's everything here. And again, remembering that if you're flying the departure procedures and you're able to maintain the gradients that you need, you know, that's why they exist, is so you don't hit something. And so you're going to be in good shape there by being able to fly those. But the other thing is that to say, okay, so here I am, I'm beginning to fly out of this airport here and I'm ready to go. What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if I start to lose some of my instruments and I become a partial panel in the clouds? What do? You're going to want to come back and land at that airport. So here's the way I was taught, is that before you launch, you've got all this stuff set for where you're going, but you leave on one of your navigation systems, you leave an approach set up so that you can come back to that airport if you need to. So for instance, if you're departing Aspen and you're heading out, you're flying the departure out there to the Roaring Fork, you're heading out to the Linz intersection, and you're coming out and doing all this stuff, and we'll look at all of that. If something goes wrong, you want to know, do I come back to Aspen? Do I go to Rifle? Do I go to Glenwood? Do I go to Eagle? What do I do? In most cases, and Aspen may be it may not be the one that you want to come back to, but in most cases, you will set your a procedure that will allow you to fly back to that airport and land if you need to. So that's just another thought to just kind of keep in your head about an instrument departure, is you got to think, okay, if something goes wrong, I need to be able to come back here and land. And you want to try to preset as much of that stuff as you can that's practical, so that you don't have to be doing a whole lot of work. Because again, if you're in the clouds and something goes wrong, it's a pretty high workload. And so the things that you can do to keep that from happening, workload stuff, that's what I would do. So you can look here, setting your courses, and you're looking here, for instance, here we go, we've got somebody and they're using an NDB here, but if you're taking off from this airport, you get to your safe altitude. In most cases, that's going to be 500 feet AGL. Fly that runway heading straight out to 500 feet, unless ATC gives you something different. And then you want that heading bug set to that first turn to come back here. So in this case, they've got it set on some kind of a southwesterly heading to come in here and to intercept this radial outbound. In this case, it's not a radial, it's just an NDB, and it's just a kind of a homing thing. So, but that's kind of how it is, where you go and you intercept a particular radial and off you go. And I love this. This is with no wind. In other words, nil. Love that. I feel so cosmopolitan whenever I say nil. Here's another way to kind of use this here, is that intercepting a particular radial. Notice how it looks like they're doing it here at a 45-degree angle, which we've talked about. Intercepting that, flying to that VOR and off. A lot of times your en route segments and your flight plannings begin at a navigational aid. There may be some times where it begins at a particular intersection, but a lot of times they'll begin with a navigational aid. So a lot of times they'll have you flying out to a VOR and then from there flying to a particular place. I know that in Aspen we do fly to a waypoint at an intersection, which in most cases it's kind of what we call the Linz departure. And you're flying out to Linz, which is kind of over Carbondale, somewhere between Carbondale and Glenwood Springs. And you're flying out there and you get to that Linz departure at a particular altitude at that point. And if not, you get there and you circle in a holding pattern until you can reach a particular altitude, to then go ahead and intercept your courses outbound, because they want to make sure you're at the MEAs before you start, flying toward Granite. So in these cases here, this is kind of how they're doing it, is that they're getting you to a navigational aid as opposed to an intersection or waypoint, and then beginning your course from there. One of the things here in this note, and this is also pretty important, and it talks about a lot of these instrument departures that they give you, is that you could be in bright sunny days and you're out there flying an instrument departure, because of the fact that just gets you into the system better. It gets you in the rocking chair with regards to ATC, watching over your shoulder, etc. But in that case, even though that you're on an instrument flight plan and ATC is responsible for separation between you and others, it's always a good idea to, again, anytime that you can, practice the see and avoid method of not hitting anything. Remember, DHN, don't hit nothing. That's kind of the big deal. So it goes through some of the things here about not hitting anything. Okay, now, actual instrument departure procedures, or DPs. These are going to be published here. These are going to be in the materials that you have here, and what we are going to do is that we're going to start, boy, we got 10 minutes. On Wednesday, we're going to be pulling up some of the departure procedures. So guys, make sure that tomorrow you bring that packet of those loose leaf things. I think they've got like seven holes at the top of all of those things. We lovingly refer to them as the approach plates. But you're going to see those. I believe the ones that you have are for Colorado and New Mexico, I think is the ones that you guys have. We're going to be using those tomorrow to walk through certain departure procedures so that you can understand what these things look like and how to use them, okay? So make sure that you bring that stuff with you. When you look, you have some of the departure procedures that you're going to be looking at. We used to call them SIDs, which are standard instrument departures. We used to have these things called SIDs and STARS. Standard instrument departures, standard terminal arrival procedures. So STAR would be the arrival, the SID would be taken off. But now they call them departure procedures, DPs. So, you know, I don't know. And here's one thing to get this. And again, guys, you know, they write this stuff down because they kind of have to. To accept a departure procedure, you must have at least have it written down in the cockpit. I know. So, yeah, good idea to have that. So what you're going to look at here is a departure procedure, and these are the things that you're going to be getting when you get your clearance. They will be telling you about the departure procedure that you can expect. This is what they want you to do. You can either accept it or you can decline the departure procedure. If you decline the departure procedure, that may open up some funky routing for you to be able to do that. It is your prerogative to accept or decline the departure procedure, but just understand is that sometimes, especially at some of these busy airports, they may not have time to mess with you right then because they're trying to get a push going, they're trying to get airplanes in and out of that place, and so sometimes they may not be able to get you out if you can't get you out at the time that you want to go if you can't accept the departure procedure. So just remember, not accepting that departure procedure is your prerogative, but it may limit your ability to get out and go where you want to go when you want to go. So keep that in mind. And when you're filing, that's what this means here, is that you can put down here is that you can say, okay, no DP, I do not want a departure procedure. So that means kind of, you know, what it is that you're doing. Bullet points. Every time I say bullet point, think test question. So, departure procedures, here's what they're designed to do, and you can take a look at them. Okay, ATC clearances. This is the part where you file a flight plan. You file a flight plan in advance. In the instrument world, you can file this through 1-800-WX-BRIEF. Like you file a VFR flight plan, you can file an IFR flight plan. You can do it on ForeFlight. And if you choose to file a flight plan on ForeFlight, guys, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, excuse me, I couldn't reach the mute button here quick enough. If you want to file a flight plan, let's say that you want to do it on ForeFlight, and you're flying here. Here's one of mine. With this, you can set your route and you can proceed to the file thing, and you can do all of this electronically now and file your flight plan. So I can enter in all of my information here, and you guys can pause this if you want to take a look at it. Enter in all of the information, enter in all of your routing, enter in everything that you want to go, and down at the very bottom of this, you would just simply hit the file and it would file it. Normally, you're going to hear or you're going to check back. It takes, depending on when you do it, early in the morning and late in the afternoon, they get kind of busy with stuff, so it takes sometimes a little while. You definitely want to do this no less than 30 minutes prior to your departure, because it takes a while for that to happen. I try to make it about a 45-minute thing to say, here's where, this is kind of when I want to go. So that's kind of what you want to do, is you want to give it time to get in the system. Now, just because you file for it doesn't mean that that's what they're going to give you. You may say, okay, I want a particular routing over here, and then they may come back to you and say, I can't give that to you today. We've got an MOA that's hot over here. I've got traffic over here, whatever the reason may be, and they may give you something else. And then you have to copy down the new information here, and we'll show you how to do that. Copy down the new information. And then you get off, and 5 minutes into the flight, they say, okay, I can give you GPS direct, which is like, okay, that would have been nice to have just gotten at the beginning, but hey, you know, that's kind of how we play the game. So this is a way to file your flight plan. So again, 1-800-WX-BRIEF is one way you can do it. Filing it on ForeFlight. We are a ForeFlight institution, and so we use ForeFlight. It's just the way we do it. And I've told you guys this a bunch, is that you know, again, spent so much time planning, you know, these awesome routes to every place, and then 15 minutes into the flight they give you something else. And so you do what you think is best for you. You file for what you want, and then if they give you something else, they give you something else, and you can either accept it or you can decline it. And if you decline it, well, you're you know, may not be able to kind of go where you want to go or do what you want to do when you want to do it. So you kind of have to be flexible in what you do. Normally what we do is we plan our work and we work our plan. But understanding these things is that sometimes that plan, you know, other people's got other plans for you as well. So, so there's that. ATC clearances here. It tells you kind of what you can do. And one of the other things too, and this goes here into the you know, what is good kind of thing, and that's this stuff that's in the margins here, is that don't accept a clearance you can't fly, because that's just setting you up for trouble on so many levels. You can request an amended clearance, is to say, okay, I can't do that, but I can do this. May I have blah, blah, blah. And that's always within your rights to ask. So here we go. Pre-taxi clearance procedures. So normally the way that it would work is that you're out at the airport, you fire up that airplane, you get it all starting ready to go, and before you start taxi, you will call either at the airport clearance delivery, or in Aspen it would be ground, and you let them know what your tail number is and that you're ready to copy down your IFR clearance. And they'll say something to you, and they'll say, you know, something like November 504 Hotel Lima, stand by. 504 Hotel Lima, I have your IFR clearance. Please let me know when you're ready to copy. Okay. And Aspen Ground 504 Hotel Lima, we are ready to copy IFR clearance. And then they give you the clearance. You have to write it down and you have to repeat it back. So you write down what they give you, and then you have to read it back verbatim. And sometimes that takes a little while to get to be able to do that. So we're going to show you a couple of ways that you can, it is just raining just to beat the band here, guys. I apologize. Hopefully you can still hear me. And so you copy down your clearance, and we'll show you a way to do that here to make it easier for you. So here we go, and this kind of walks you through kind of how that's going to go. And this gives you an example here of the STAV-2 departure out of Las Vegas. Okay, so when you look at this, come on, baby. So you can see down here is that here you have the airport, and in essence, what they're doing is they're flying you to, you know, some kind of a waypoint. In this case, it's going to be a GPS waypoint out here with these. They fly you to a particular area. You get out here to Stav, one of the intersections, and then from Stav, you can fly these different waypoints out, and you can see here that at Stav, you cannot be below 7,000 feet. As you're flying here, they want you at the MEA of 8,000 feet. Here, 22 miles on 274. Up here to Mise, at 10,000 feet. They want you there at 10,000 feet. And again, Las Vegas, they've got terrain out there as well. Getting up there to 14.8 out here to Dice. like that, Vegas dice, and Beatty out here. And so again, this gets you out there, and this gets you your departure out of Las Vegas and up to the en route segments of your flight. And this is kind of where they're going. And this is kind of what you do. So depending upon, is the wind from the west? If the wind is from the west, you're going to be taking off to the west, into that wind, and you're going to be flying out here to Stav, heading out and following these. This is kind of what you're doing. And up here, it tells you not just what to do. So you have the text portion of this to kind of tell you what it's going to be, but it's also going to be the thing that will also show you graphically. Now remember, this stuff down here in the plan view is not to scale. It is not to scale. So you've got to understand that those things are going to be a little bit different. But it shows you graphically a plan view of what this is roughly going to look like, as well as giving you a text version of what it's going to look like. So for instance, notice this. You have standard takeoff minimums with a minimum climb gradient of 380 feet per nautical mile, okay? So you can see that here to 7,000 feet. On a different runway, on runway 7 left, you need a climb gradient of 348 to 7,000 feet. And here on 19 and 19er and 25, here a 320 nautical mile climb gradient here. So you have those climb gradient minimums. And again, look on the inside portions of those of the approach plates to find that climb gradient table to see what that means for you at a particular speed and a particular rate. Okay? So there's that. Review that information and kind of see what these things are telling you. But it is going to be one of these things that is going to be part of the quiz coming up here. Now let me get to this part. Okay. Then we're going to be picking this up here, guys, coming up here just right after the review here. So we'll pick it up on page 494 on Wednesday. We will get through the departure procedures and we will start the en route stuff, okay? So there you go. Yes, quiz Friday. It's going to be on departure procedures, and it's going to have included in the departure procedures, there will be airspace and VFR weather minimum stuff in there, okay? So that's going to be where it is, and I think I shared with you where to find that. Okay, guys, have an awesome day, and I will see you soon. See you guys.